Good evening once again, Gunju online viewers. We are back here again today, running the second episode of the Draft Constitution and Transitional Justice in the Gambia. I have got two guests today who are both legally trained and they also legal practitioners in the UK. I've got Mr. Solomon Demba.
Hello.
Hello. And then I've got Mr. Pa Louis Sambu. As you all know, the whole idea behind this discussion and other discussions that people are having all around, whether in the Gambia, in the virtual public space, or actually in bantabas in the Gambia, is just for Gambians to exchange ideas. And these debates are not, and nobody should look at them or view them or perceive them as zero-sum games where the winner takes all. That's not what we're interested in here. It's just we believe in the principle that people exchange ideas. In the end, this exchange of ideas and debates and discussion will be mutually beneficial to everybody who's taking part. So whether it's us here, whether it's my two guests, or whether it's our viewers, both in the Gambia and in the diaspora. So I would like to welcome Mr. Demba and Sambu once again. Gentlemen, if you could do a slide, just a brief introduction of yourselves, please. The floor is yours. I'll call on Mr. Demba first, please.
Hello, people of the Gambia, people of the great city of Gunjur. My name is Mr. Demba. I'm a legal practitioner in UK, but also a medic by profession. Of course, I hail from the Gambia, as you can tell from my accent. I went to Nusrat High School, from Nusrat High School to the Gambia College, then Gambia College, then I did some studies in United Kingdom in medic. And then from there, I proceeded to study law. Of course, I have 2 master's degree in law, international law and medical law, but also legal practice. And I qualified as a barrister in United Kingdom, in England and Wales. And that is Mr. Demba. I'm grateful for here today to be here to share my views with you. But if I just make a disclaimer that I'm not holding myself here as an expert, I'm asserting my right as a Gambian to participate in these important discussions. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Demba. Yeah, just to buttress that point. Yeah, we are just here to exchange ideas. Like we say, nobody is an expert. Even though the two gentlemen are legally trained, both of them are actually legal practitioners. But it's not, like I said, it's not a zero-sum game. It's just exchange of ideas. Mr. Sambu, the floor is yours. I think Mr. Sambu, unlike myself and Mr. Demba, he's much more well-known because his views on the, especially the draft constitution, it's been well known. So I think lots of people have read about him and his views and his writings. Very cogent. The arguments are very persuasive, and that's how I came across him. So the floor is yours, Mr. Sambu. If you can just give us a brief introduction of yourself, please.
Oh, thank you, Dave, for having me on your platform once more. So I'm sure most of your viewers may have come across or may have watched the program that we had. Was it 2 weeks ago? I think.
Yeah.
So and I think I'll just be brief with my introduction. So I hail from Serekunda, and right now I live in the UK. And I live in the East Midlands, and like Dave has said, my views on the draft constitution, or let's say the late draft constitution, is are well known. And I live in the UK, and I practice law in the area of tax litigation. In the UK public sector.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I don't know if you guys been following in the news recently. There have been some constitutional issues in Zambia very recently, and there has been some other issues as well in Chile. So which are very, very interesting, because in Zambia, I think there was an effort to change the constitution so that the president could have a third term in parliament, but it was defeated. Well, in Chile, I think the Chile's case is very, very important, because they actually had a referendum to decide if they should have a new constitution, compared to the Gambia, where we had like you can call it a public debate or like a participatory, obviously, but they seem to have first they actually thought it's necessary for them to seek the consent of the populace by going to a referendum to see if a new constitution is necessary. I think it was quite extraordinary, very remarkable. So I just thought I thought that was very, very interesting. Compare if you compare and contrast that to our situation in Gambia, and the issue in Zambia. I thought that was like it was incredible that they were able to actually kill the bill, if you know what I mean. So I don't know. I don't know if any of you guys have follow the what's it called, the developments both in Chile and Zambia of recent.
Well, I mean, yes, Mr. Mani. I mean, of course, you know, I have not certainly followed that that particular story, you know, but of course, the issue of our draft constitution is a very contentious issue, and of course, from my point of view, there are bads and goods about it, you know, from a Gambian perspective.
Mm.
But you know, that might be something that we'll later come to.
Mm.
But you are right. I mean, term limit is always contentious because, you know, of the effect of it politically on the whole process. So it's very unfortunately ours did not go through, you know. But I mean, a few points that I wanted to say about our constitution, particularly, which is quite relevant. I mean, I think it is important that we create a new constitution in the Gambia, although some people hold a view that, you know, maybe we should have retained the old constitution, which is the 1997 constitution.
Mm-hmm.
But my support for that is really on two important points, really. Particularly, I would say, you know, for symbolism, but also, in fact, in my view, the 1997 constitution, current constitution, has created an emperor and his men. Because by that I mean it has vested so much power in the presidency. But I'll come to that. If I start with symbolism, well, we all know, Mr. Mane, I mean, symbolism is an important way of really an effective way of breaking from past political stagnation. I mean, in the Gambia, we have seen time and time, past government has failed to develop the civil society. As a result, Gambians were not really politically tuned. They were not aware, politically engaged with the affairs of the state. So, you know, by creating the new constitution, what we've done there is actually that has given impetus to people and has given us a sense of what I call as empowerment. We saw, you know, people came in their droves, you know, during the consultation process, you know. And also, it is important that we understand that, you know, sovereignty resides in the people. You know, there are certain ways in which, if you want to change the society, you know, you have to give that back to the people to decide. You know, I mean, this is captured in the preamble of the Gambia Constitution, which rightly said the government drives its powers from the people. So if we are going to significantly change the way in which we are governed, I think it's important that we give that back to the people. And that's why I think that it was necessary to actually create a new constitution after that past years of political stagnation. You may have a different view before I come to my second point, but yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Demba. Yeah, if we just deal with your first point, and then I just want to basically that's just my observations on it, and then Mr. Sambu can probably just chip in as well. You did mention symbolism. I do agree it was very symbolic, but my concern, and I add that, and I share that with lots of people. Then it's like, apart from the symbolism, it's actually any substance to it. I think I have that concern a lot when it comes to some Gambian politics. We are very heavy on symbolism, but if you take the symbolism apart, we don't seem to have a lot of substance. But then again, like I said, and I'm also, you guys have to forgive me, I'm not legally trained, obviously, but I thought that a constitution is just a framework. So there's going to be no perfect framework of how to govern a people or a state. So it can always be amended and improved upon. So that's my fundamental belief, and because of that, I didn't think that a new constitution was necessary. I was very vocal about it as well, even from my layman's understanding of what is involved. For me, it might be very simplistic and naive, but from my understanding was like it's just a legal framework for like mechanism for running a state. So we could have the 1997 constitution, which I think because again going back to symbolism again, because of its inherent link to Yaya Jammeh, and people been so eager to open a new chapter when it comes to the Gambian polity. They were very, very eager to actually try and create a new constitution, but I didn't think much thought went into it, except for the symbolism. But substance-wise, I think substance was lacking. Mr. Sambo, I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yes, I think right at the start, you raised a very important point, which is the case of Chile. I think that's a very important point, because I think Chile have done something which I think, in our case, Gambia, we should have explored, but because we didn't, I think that was part of the problem. Because for starters, the 1997 Constitution does not have a provision within itself which allow for its repeal. So, among this is a question which I have raised with pretty much everybody who I came across, whose supports the repeal of the 1997 Constitution, which I don't have any emotional attachment to the 1997 Constitution or anything. For me, really, what I look at is the substance. Is the substance of whatever it is that is being proposed, and whether whatever it is that is being proposed is something that serves the needs and the aspirations of the people. It doesn't really matter. For me, really, symbolism is not something that I think. Yeah, it's good to have to break away from the past. Yes, but we have to do that in a very sensible way, and it has to be lawful as well. Because if at all the 1997 Constitution does not have a provision which allow for its repeal, then the only way you can repeal it is either, for example, do what Chile have done, put the question to a referendum and let people decide that, yes, we need a new constitution. And then you can write off, you can use that as a mandate to bring in a new constitution. But what we had in the Gambia, we completely sidestepped the first question and automatically imposed a review commission on the people. Yes, the CRC Act was passed in Parliament, yes, but the CRC Act being passed in Parliament, or the CRC Act is a primary legislation. And we all know that the Constitution is the superior legal authority. So unless and until the 1997 Constitution allows for its repeal, any legislation that you pass in order to facilitate the repeal of the 1997 Constitution would not be lawful, and the CRC Act was not lawful. But I am perfectly happy if Mr. Demba can perhaps guide me and maybe explain to me, maybe there's something that I'm missing in the 1997 Constitution to point out the provision in the 1997 Constitution which allows for its repeal. It doesn't exist. We can amend it, yes, we can amend it, but we cannot repeal it. For us to repeal it, you need to seek the consent of the people to repeal it, or we can have a referendum to amend the 1997 Constitution so that we will insert a provision within the 1997 Constitution to allow for its repeal. then once we have the provision which allows for its repeal, then we can repeal. But I think the process was flawed right from the start, and and um, and once the CRC Act was brought in, the commission was constituted. Everything else that the commission did, I think most people like myself, I was not in favor of the route that was taken, because I think the route that they took was pretty much overthrowing the 1997 constitution, just like Jammeh overthrew the 1970 constitution. The only difference was Jammeh did it using the barrel of the gun, but these people did it by other means. So both of them, it does not matter what method you use, but the result was you were trying to replace an existing legal framework in a manner which is not in conformity with the law. So moving on from that, I think most people, myself for certain, I was perfectly happy with the settlement that yes, if at all the majority of the Gambians are happy with this process, even though the process is not lawful in my well, in reality it's not lawful. This is not my opinion, this is a fact. It wasn't lawful. I was perfectly happy to settle for that. But then now you look at the substance of the draft constitution. My God, we cannot have you cannot have a democratic system of government, which is supposed to be something that represents the interests, the wishes, and the views of a people. Gambians are citizens. We are not divided into majority and minority, or tribes and factions. No, we are citizens. But once you have a legal framework which seeks to divide the citizens on grounds of religion and other things, which I think it becomes a problem. For me, that's where I started to lose it with this with the concept of the draft constitution, and that's where I think everything started falling apart. And to be honest, moving on where we are now, I don't think that question should come back. I think we should move on, because the 1997 constitution, it is not perfect. It has problems, but those problems can be improved and they can be amended. And I'm sure when all the respective parties come together, I think we can we can find a consensus.
Well, I think, okay, well, Mr. Sabu, you make a very important point there, which is consent, about the consent of the people. Because the thing is that, although it has not been expressively stated to say that, I mean, people have given their consent. But in fact, if at all, if it were the case that this constitution passed the referendum, then one would take that view. So no power can be more powerful than that. I mean, if we talk about the consent, even if you look at the 1997 constitution, one may take a view, the manner in which it was imposed on the people haven't actually given their consent. So, in fact, trying to start a new thing, I mean, it might not be expressively stated, but impliedly, you could say that's the process is trying to do that exactly. And I think that is why it's important. I mean, one of the points that you mentioned is about amending the 1997 constitution. I mean, we know, as I said before, that constitution has vested excessive power in the executive to a level that the executive is rendered as a king and his men by way of appointing in different organs of the state. If you want to use a political process to change that, I think you're likely to fall flat on your face, because the political process is likely to stall that. We saw what happened to the draft constitution. I mean, you may cite an example of the Second Amendment, of the American Constitution, which we know the problem is causing. If you want to take a process through a parliament, a political process, that is what is likely to slow the whole process. So it is important, I think, and it's also prudent for us to really give back the power to the people. Yes, of course, you could have incorporated that question there, But I think that that is implied. It will be implied in the sense that if people have given their consent, then that's what the constitution would stand. But I mean, I spoke about the sort of the power vested in the presidency. Particularly if you look at the judiciary, which I do sort of take it with a very closer look because of my area of practice. You look at the appointments of the Chief Justice. The 1997 Constitution, in line with that, is the president who should appoint it. If you look at section, I think 138 of the Constitution, something like that, 136 or 138, the president shall appoint the Chief Justice. Who is the Chief Justice? The Chief Justice is the head of the judiciary. Then what it says, it must appoint that with consultation with the Judicial Service Commission. Go to section 145 of the Constitution 19 and see who are in the Judicial Service Commission. That composed of the same Chief Justice, but also a High Court judge who is also appointed by the president. So that might be like, appointing Ninja to do, also to recommend to you, again, appointment of the judges. So, the principle of separation of power, it's if you look at it from a philosophical point of view, is to ensure that the power is dispersed within the state. And that, means that the organs of the state must be separated. So I think the 1997 Constitution, in my view, actually, it should be been, in the sense that really, I think that is not fit for purpose. Because if you want to use the political process to amend it, it's going to fail. Because you know what politicians are capable of doing.
Okay, let me just come in there. I think you raised a very important question there with regards to the appointment of judges. Okay, let's try and clarify something here. The separation of powers does not mean that the president cannot appoint judges, or the president cannot appoint the Chief Justice. It does not mean that. As long as the checks and balances are in place, whereby the president does not have the sole authority to appoint and the sole authority to dismiss, as long as that doesn't exist, I think then the system will work. So, like I said at the start, I am not here to say, or I have never held the view that the 1997 Constitution is perfect and it has to be maintained as it is. No, that is not my position at all. My position is there are problems within the 1997 Constitution. And these problems, we all know them. So rather than bringing in something else, which cannot be brought in lawfully in the manner that those who try to bring it in try to pursue that particular policy, the draft we can leave to one side. Let's look at the 1997 Constitution as it is right now. Like the point that you have raised, I think they are valid points. But what I am saying is, yes, I agree with you with the points that you have raised. I agree with you 100%. Let us look at those problems within the 1997 Constitution and fix them. And I think that you have a consensus there. You and I disagree on the draft Constitution, but we agree that the 1997 Constitution is not perfect. It needs fixing. Yes, I agree. So, which is why I'm saying there is consensus that the 1997 Constitution is not perfect. It needs changing. There is consensus there. So let us work on that and fix the 1997 Constitution and put that to a referendum and move on, rather than trying to bring something else in to replace an existing framework, which one does not have a provision which allows for such a thing to happen, and two, you are just bringing in something that is even more problematic, because looking at both the 1997 Constitution and the draft Constitution, there are more problems within the draft Constitution as it was at the time that it was voted down. than there are in the 1997 Constitution. I'll just give you one example. I am not sure to what extent you have considered this issue. If we look at the issue of human rights, the issue of fundamental human rights in the 1997 Constitution and in the draft Constitution, under the 1997 Constitution, the state only has a constitutional authority to limit no more than 5 fundamental human rights. And one of these is freedom of speech. Obviously, when it comes to freedom of speech, the state can pass primary legislation to regulate the boundaries of how this right should be exercised. Obviously, somebody cannot be allowed to use their right to freedom of speech to come and say things which are going to inflame society or to make a propaganda for war. All these things are within the power of the state under the 1997 Constitution to limit the fundamental human rights when it comes to freedom of speech, which would cover freedom of expression as well. Then you look at the freedom of the media. The state can pass primary legislation to limit it. The same when it comes to freedom of assembly. That is why we have the Public Order Act. And now, in fact, plus the right to life as well is not absolute under the 1997 Constitution. Okay, now the 1997 Constitution allows only these 5 fundamental human rights to be limited by the state. Okay, now you compare this position, the position of the 1997 Constitution, to the position of the draft Constitution. If you look at draft section 36, what you will find out is draft section 36 has pretty much allowed the state the constitutional authority to limit and restrict any fundamental human rights to the extent that that fundamental human rights is not an absolute right under ICCPR, under the International Convention of Civil and Political Rights. And as you know, there are so many rights, existing fundamental human rights under the 1997 Constitution today, which the state cannot restrict, but which under the draft Constitution, as it was at the time that it was voted down, can be restricted. And I'll give you a few examples. When it comes to the rights of women, the state under the 1997 Constitution does not have any constitutional authority to limit the rights of women. The rights of children, the same thing. When it comes to the right to education, the same thing. But in the draft Constitution, even though it has been very generous in the number of rights that it has accorded citizens, but unfortunately, all those rights have been left open, or there's a backdoor for the state to come in and restrict whatever it wants to restrict. So there are problems with the draft Constitution.
Well,
which is why, sorry, comment.
No, what I was just going to say, it's not a perfect document as well. We know that, and in fact, my point is this, I think, you're better off to really sort of make the 1997, the draft Constitution workable than the 1997 Constitution. And the reason that I said that is because there are so many aspects of the 1990s Constitution you need to rectify to make it purposeful for the function of the state. So, and I said to you, which is the fact is that, the political process that is, that's going to undergo, that itself, can you just imagine the political dramas that would have led to? That is likely to stall the whole process. So you'll be back to square one. The sovereignty rise in the people. So we must give back the people the rights if we feel that we need to fundamentally change the way in which a state is being operated.
Yes, but the issue there. Sorry, Dave. I think you want to comment.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay, but Mr. Lema, the problem that we have there is, regardless of whichever process it is that we use, we cannot sidestep the National Assembly. I think you and I can agree on that.
Yes, of course.
Yes, we cannot sidestep the National Assembly. So any proposal or any mechanism that we are going to use, if at all it is going to be something that is compliant with the law and with democracy, it cannot sidestep Parliament. And when it goes to Parliament, obviously the politics would have to come into play. So that is something that we cannot avoid. But for me, really, that's not really my focus. I think regardless of what mechanism you use and what the substance is, politicians are still going to play politics with it. I think that we cannot that is something that we cannot avoid. But the starting point has to be whatever it is that you have as a proposal to replace the existing legal order has to be something that addresses the current problems that
Yeah,
we have.
in fact,
Yes.
yes, indeed so. And I think this is why I'm saying that, I mean, impliedly, it might be important to really to make that as a expression, to state it very clearly. You could, concurrently run that problem alongside with on the current constitution, the way in which you incorporate it. So that might give the people to consent, because this is about consent, and giving back the people the empowerment, the ability to decide the way forward. So I think that is not so significant from my point of view, because that can be easily satisfied. Because I mean, any law that you see, as you know, is not static. Law has to move. So sometimes that law have to move in a way that's meet the society need. So I mean, if we go back, the same thing. If we go back to the 1997 Constitution, the way in which it was actually incorporated, one could actually raise the question of consent. But of
You
course,
know,
we have passed that stage, because it was already endorsed. But there is issue of that. So for me, I mean, 1997 Constitution, yes, it has some role to play in the way in which we govern. But to be more precise, I think the draft constitution has given us a sense of one empowerment, but also breaking away from the past political stagnation. And I think it actually placed the Gambia in a better footing than the toxic 1997 constitution.
I, I I disagree. I disagree because if I'll give you an example, I don't think the draft constitution has placed the Gambia in better footing at all, because under the existing constitution, the courts are not allowed. The constitution has not expressly allowed the courts to sidestep international law whenever they decide issues, especially when it comes to the issues of fundamental human rights. But if you look at the draft constitution, I believe it would be draft section 10, subsection 3. It expressly allows, gives the courts, the Gambian courts, an option to disregard international law. So how can that be something that
No,
is good for us? It's
no,
not.
but
Come on.
yeah. But the problem is that I mean, that there are certain international standards that are well established, and no one can contract yourself out of that. No state should have the ability to do that. I mean, the position that you put forward. If then are we saying that I think is it schedule 1303 with that, with the immunity clause?
No, 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 no. This is not the schedule. This is the existing the draft constitution, draft section 10, subsection 3.
Yes.
It gives the Gambian courts an option to depart or disregard international law when they're interpreting
Well, I suppose
human
what it
rights
has got.
provisions.
Yeah, I mean, what is international law might be more fluid to define from that perspective. And I feel that maybe that provision might be something that we need to look at. But I don't think maybe you may find it difficult to enforce it. As I already said, there are, already international standards that are actually embedded in our constitution. And because we, as you know, we have acceded to some of the instruments that are internationally. So therefore, we cannot contract ourselves. But I suppose what it has given is some level of discretion to the court. When the need arises, maybe this might be necessary because obviously some issues are more culturally, embedded. So it might be necessary to actually look at it from that perspective. But I do feel that it is almost impossible to actually for them to be able to contract themselves out of international law.
Yes, but just a question, if I may. Can you imagine any situation whereby it would be acceptable for the courts to depart away from international law and stick with?
Well, well, no, that's unthinkable. I mean, I think it's really. I mean, maybe that provision is more flowery. I would say,
And this is
So
the problem.
yeah. So
And
I
this is
mean,
the problem
yeah,
with the draft. This is the precise problem with the draft constitution.
yeah. I mean,
There are
but
issues.
yeah, but that
Sorry,
you
go on.
see, this is about drafting. There are some areas of the law that are almost sort of contradictory to one another. Which we'll come to, particularly if you look at the time limit, which we'll talk about at some point. But but what that does, it allow the main fundamentals to stay, so that because there are every framework is like a house. There are pillars to every framework. So those pillars you cannot destroy. If you don't build the house on proper pillars, you are likely it's not likely to last long. But I
Yeah, but
think that particular provision, it may be the case that it might be not enforceable, because what is international law, or it does not define what is the limit of that.
yes,
So
but
I think and it is also my view that I'm not saying that the whatever is in the draft constitution is perfect. As you rightly mentioned at the start of the conversation, is that a constitution is an instrument. It's a living law, as you know, is a living instrument. It allows it to be changed in accordance with the needs of the society. So I think but from any perspective, my perspective, really, I think that the 1997 Constitution is really is less favorable to me than the draft. On the points that I mentioned before.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. That was
Mm.
important exchanges there. Very educative, very what's it called? A very in-depth analysis from both of you. Um, like I make very clear. So my views might be naive because of obviously I lack the legal training. I like the legal perspectives you guys can bring to a discussion. But once again, if you would just excuse me, this again coming from my layman's perspective. I mean, what's it called? Mr. Demba mentioned so many times that the politicians they are self-interest, but I don't think. And then I think Mr. Sambu answered that very, 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 very well. I mean, there's no getting away from politicians getting involved in this. The draft constitution, it just wouldn't matter. It just no way. It's no way of getting away from it. We can't get away from them, so they'll have to be involved. Yeah. But coming back to some of the points Mr. Sambu made again, I think it's quite important. Both of you made some very important points, obviously. But I, like Mr. Savo, I also agree, and I'm very, very strong believer that I don't think the consent of the people were actually sought. I think saying that, oh, we did a review, we went here, we went to the diaspora, met people, but I just think, I don't think it was enough. I mean, if they have actually educated our people, I mean, that this seems to be a problem with Gambians, and now I'm bringing my social science training here. I think the problem with the Gambians, like our people don't get informed. Yeah, it seems. I mean, you can go from Jawara's time. Our people are not civically aware, and we don't seem to have torn a new page. You'll have a people taking upon themselves that they know what is best for the people, and then they go along with that. That's why I thought it's important. We look at the situation in Chile, and I'm just try and compare and contrast. I mean, Chile, you could say they had a dictatorship, very military
Yeah.
dictatorship, much more brutal than Yajame, relatively. But they still thought it necessary that they should have a referendum to even decide if they should change their constitution. That's informed decision making. We didn't have this in the Gambia. I mean, it's participatory, it's interactive, but if we actually go down to the fundamentals of it, most of the people they actually interacted, we didn't even understand what the constitution was all about. For them, it's
Yeah.
Jame is bad, is gone. We're moving on. We're turning a new page. We have to start a new constitution. We need to get a new constitution drafted. But they didn't tell them, no, actually, the constitution we had, yeah, so it was brought here by Jammeh. Yes, he was a brutal dictator. You can agree with that or disagree. It's all very relative, but there is an option here. We don't need to embark on a very expensive draft constitution process. I didn't think it was necessary. This is coming from my layman term also as a social science, somebody who's a social scientist, but obviously your legal perspective is different to mine. And that's why it's important we have two of you here having this legal, you having this conversation, but also much more legalistic. Yeah. So I think it's very, very important. But unless any of you wanted to take this for what's it called this debate any further, I mean there's a second part to this whole constitution making process. Obviously, that's this transitional justice system. Every people seem to think that this is quite is linked. This is so linked to the new draft constitution that without the new draft constitution making it into our law books, becoming a constitution, becoming a reality, there is a danger that the transitional justice system might go awry. And that again, that is a belief I don't share. I don't know what's your take on that. But obviously,
Well,
you don't want you shouldn't jump on the second part if you still want to continue on the first part
well,
about the discussion you two gentlemen are having. I'm happy for us to continue, and then
yeah,
we can move on to the what's it called, the transitional justice system and people's fear. To me, is ungrounded fear that there is a risk that the transitional justice system might go awry. All right, I don't think so. I don't know what's your take on that.
yeah. Well, I think, it's just a little bit on that constitution. I just sort of want to deliberate on to highlight certain, I mean, in my view, I mean, as I said, the draft, I don't think is perfect, really, because I have my sort of issues with the draft. And particularly, I think that the draft at the moment, if I want to put it correctly, is that, it is the failure of the political class, but also the draft, a lack of foresight, or what I would refer to moral realism on the part of the drafters. To some respect, that leads to the total collapse of the Constitution. At the moment, it's in a comatose status, but maybe there might be a hope for it to revive. I don't know, but we'll have to wait and see. But the interesting thing is that, is that because politicians really, as I said, I mean, the issue, particularly the Gambia political class, which of course include the opposition, the politics of just beating and dismissive politics, I think to some respect that has led, because politics is about really building consensus on fundamental issues that are important to the society to serve the collective interest of the society. So although everyone belongs to a party, but I think at times, politicians, do fail to execute that duty properly. I mean, if I come to the lack of the foresight of the drafters, I would say this because I and also I take a view. Maybe they were boxed by the political pressure at the time to put a time limit on the sort of the time limit clause there, which has an impinging retroactive effect on the time limit of the current president. Because I mean, there are times that when you are drafting document, you have to take a little bit of, you have to be pragmatic. You have to look at whether actually this document can pass the process. So if you do it without really taking those pragmatical consideration, then what you have done, you have set yourself to fail. So in this regard, because by putting that provision there, I mean, the incumbent is not going to welcome that. And obviously, there are a lot of issues around it. But also, if you go back to the 1997 Constitution, Section 100, you look at subsection 2 and E of the Constitution stated very clearly, the National Assembly shall not pass laws that would have a retroactive effect on a fundamental right of any citizen. You see? So although it's the other aspect of it says they may pass it, but that is only when really, which is discretional. So that means that actually, if they have really looked at that, because you see, in order to bring another a new instrument on board, you have to look at what you have first, which I agree with you, Mr. Yeah. You have to look at that and find a way to work around that. Yeah. So I think, from my point of view, that was the lack of foresight from them to look at those provisions. Because the fundamental right engaged here is actually the political right of a citizen to act in public office. So if you give that retroactive effect, to some respect, what you're doing, you are actually constraining the same right that has been given in the same constitution. So it's illogical. So that is why I think that the failure of the constitution is the draft. On part is on the political class, but also on the drafters as well. It's not that I've given the draft constitution a free ride. I don't give anyone a free ride. But what I'm trying to say is that it is the best option, and I maintain that position. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sambu. Just before you can chip in, I just wanted to. I know it might sound cliche, but you have to actually ask the right questions to get the right answer. So I didn't think the whole constitution, the draft constitution process, I don't think they even asked the right question. I very strongly believe in that. I mean, because I can never get away from the fact that they didn't tell the people there is an option here. To them, there was no option. We have to have a new draft constitution. We have to draft a new constitution. And I didn't think that was right.
Well, in fact,
I didn't think people are informed.
Yeah, I think you can excuse them for the fact that the status of affairs at the material time as well. We have to be a little bit, because obviously this is why I bring in foresight into it, because foresight means that you're looking at all what is happening around you, and that may be that, it would be necessary at the material time to raise those fundamental questions, whether do we need this actually, do we need to ask the Gambian people, or do we need to really incorporate this into the whole process, because in terms of the consent, of course, consultation process cannot be seen as is a methodology that has been used to affirm people consent now, because we haven't used any measurement to actually, or method to measure people consent at the material time. I think the consent would have been given if the constitution reached the people. That's where the consent of the people would have been attained. So, but at the start of the process, that is just to actually engage people and to see what they say. So it will be, a great sense of falseness to think that actually we, at that material time, we are seeking their consent to because you have not a draft any way of finding. Of course, you could do a constitution, a referendum, conduct a referendum, which would be counted. But if you haven't done that, then the consultation process cannot be regarded as a way of seeking informed consent.
If Mr. Sambu, if you will just give me 1 minute there, please.
Yes, you see, there's one thing that that most people have been repeating over and over again, that the draft constitution reflects the will of the Gambian people. It didn't reflect the will of the Gambian people at all. It reflected the will of the drafters, not the will of the Gambian people. I completely disagree, because I have went through their report, and I have looked at a number of things, and some of these things are some of the things that are very contentious. The first one is there is no part of the consultation of the CRC, and this is not even in their report, where the Gambian citizens that were consulted gave consent or expressed a view that they wanted the drafters, or express a majority view that they wanted the drafters to change the current state of the law so that non-Muslims would be subject to Sharia law. That did not happen. But if you look at the draft constitution, that is exactly what has happened. That is number one. Then number two, we look at the issue of the term limit, the retroactive term limit. No part of the CRC consultation, or in no part of the CRC consultation has the citizens that they were consulted, expressed a view that the term limit should be retroactive. It is not there, but I can signpost anybody who wishes to just double check to make sure, because I am not making this up at all. If you look at paragraphs 363 to paragraph 366 of the CRC report, their final report on the draft constitution, it covers the issue of the term limit, and there's nothing there which suggests that making the term limit retroactive was something that came from the people. It didn't come from the people, so it must come from the drafters, not the people. Then we look at the issue of having an upper age limit, which I have to be very just to be clear. I personally don't think we should have an upper age limit for the presidency. I don't think we should. That should be something that the Gambian people decide. I don't think we should have an upper age limit at all, because it is not democratic. But this is something that 71% of those that the drafters consulted said that they wanted the draft constitution to introduce an upper age limit for the presidency. 71%. This was a very big majority, 71% of the citizens. And this you can find at paragraphs 353 to paragraph 355 of the CRC report. Then moving on, the issue of citizenship. 71% or over 71% of those that were consulted instructed the CRC to allow people that are born in the Gambia to non-Gambian parents to have birthright citizenship, to be citizens of the Gambia by birth automatically. But then again, the CRC did not put that in the draft constitution. So, which is a problem, because the thing is, one, we have the politics, and two, we have the lack of foresight of the drafters. But at the same time, I am not trying to impugn the intention of the drafters, or to imply bad will, to imply ill will or bad faith on the part of the drafters. But I think some of these things that I have raised, I think they raise questions as to the independence of the drafters, because clearly, what the mandate they were given was to reflect the will of the Gambian people, to the extent that such a view was something that can be accommodated in a constitution. But they haven't done that. In some instances, they have actually decided to do things which the people did not even say. And in other instances, they decided to disregard what people have said. So I think this is why I think the draft constitution is so divisive that I think trying to reopen it is just going to cause more problems. We have one, the 1997 constitution. I think all of us, or not maybe everybody, but the majority of Gambians would agree that it is flawed. It needs to be fixed. Let's agree on a way forward and fix it. But bringing the draft, I don't think is a solution, because there are lots of things there that the citizens have not really asked for. It is not the will of the Gambian people at all. There is no consent, because you cannot draft something, right, and then have things in it that, one, do not reflect the will of the people, and two, ignore some of the things that people have raised, and then you expect to ask people the question right at the end to say yes or no. Even if some say yes, it would not be informed consent, because some would say yes because they just don't like the 1997 constitution. But it does not necessarily mean that their dislike of the 1997 constitution does not necessarily translate to them agreeing with or having consented to everything in the draft constitution. It's a very problematic situation, and I think we just need to stick with the devil that we know and just try and improve it.
Well, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Demba. If I can just chip in, thank you so much, Mr. Sambu. I think, and there's going to be context here. Obviously, I'm just not talking just for the sake of it. I think, like you mentioned, it's not like it's bad faith by the drafters. I think the drafters, this is very common in the Gambia. I think it's actually patronizing, and I say that with the utmost respect. I think they just took it upon themselves. They can speak on behalf of the Gambian masses. And then we can move away from the symbolism of this. This is very significant here. The symbolism of Yaya Jammeh is an old chapter. We are opening a new chapter. I think you can never get away from it. I think that's why it gave them this, how do you want to call it? It gave them this self-belief. They are acting, in what's it called, for the good of the Gambians.
Yeah.
But they didn't think that they needed to seek our consent. That's what I think. I mean, if you look at this participatory, they say we spoke to villagers, but it's not in depth. And then we don't want to be disrespectful to our people because we are our people. But our people are not very, very up to date with politics. Let me just say that way. Okay? Our people are not very civically educated. They're not civically empowered. They don't even, over 60% of our people don't even know how they, as citizens, need to interact with the government, people who represent them. Yeah. And this can go back to Jawara's time. I think this lack of educating our people was missing, and it's still missing today. So we always compare ourselves to Senegal, and which I think is all right in some ways, and other times I think it's very unhealthy. But if you look at Senegal, you look at their political history. The Senegalese, when it comes to the political consciousness, I use this, I use this in a very, very, very carefully, and they are much more aware about their political rights than Gambians are, really, because they had a tradition, they had a history. I think the Senegalese having what they call députés, going to France to represent them during colonial days. Like people are saying, oh, people like what's his name, the guy, the Blaise, is it Blaise Diagne, and others. They represented Senegal. So in what they call it in Paris as representative. That's why we had the word député in our own political lexicon in the Gambia. It's not English. Yeah. So the Senegalese understand politics more than we do. And then when Senghor also came to power, I'm not a historian here anyway, but this is just comparatively. And he made an effort to make Senegalese actually understand. And they were able to make a clear distinction between politics, party politics, and then what you can call like, I don't know what time you want to call them. You can call them technocrats. They had technocrats on one side who will run the state. And they had politicians and politics. We didn't have this separation in the Gambia. So this is the mess there. So, and the country was so small that where anybody who can be anybody either have to be a politician. I mean, it was the pinnacle of somebody's achievement in life to be a minister. And that is still happening in the Gambia, because this is all due to our lack of political education, political awareness. I know I'm talking like a socialist. That's just, that's a doy. I'm a doy acolyte. You can always see it anyway. Well, anyway, I just thought I'd chip that in there. These fundamental, until we correct this in the Gambia, you're going to have people thinking that, patronizing, that they can speak on behalf of the masses because they know what is good for the masses. And I think it's a very wrong move. I think we need to move away from it. Thank you, guys. I don't know if you still want to keep on talking about the draft constitution, or we can move to, like I said,
I just wanted to say a little bit on the issue of the circular word. And I think it's regrettable that that word was excluded, because I don't see any need of doing so. Because, in fact, one may take a view that Gambia is already anchored as a circular society, really, and our constitution promotes that. But I think was the fact that because the concept was hugely sort of misinterpreted by some people, because although in my view it just simply means separation of the state from religion, because religion is regarded as a private matter. So the state affairs should be completely separated. I mean, we saw that happens in France, in 1905. You look at England. England is not a circular state as such, but the society itself is circular, because you have the Church of England as the head of religion in England. You look at Italy. Italy, although that's the home for Christianity, or where the Vatican is, but it's a circular state since from 1983. So I think, in fact, trying to put that and give that some kind of attention, that to some respect has actually torpedo other issues that should have been discussed, really. And I think, in my view, although, Professor Talat Assad, professor of anthropology from University of New York, has persuasively argued to say that secularism is rooted in Christian culture. But the problem with that, is the fact that, culture and human beings are almost inseparable because you cannot separate them. But, I think in the simplest term, secularism would actually mean that separating the state from religion so that religion can be more purified, in my view, actually. So I think, it was a mistake to give that sort of to highlight that issue. As a result, it became a contentious issue in our society, and people interpreted it in a way that suits them. So I think that is also lack of foresight on the part of the drafters, really. And this may well be that, they were boxed by political pressures, because at the material time, you have to look at the events that were happening in the Gambia. There were major fallouts and things like that. So, but people who goes to, it's only the political protagonists who are likely to go to a consultation meeting than, than most people, So this is why the consent become a little bit difficult to prove that, people is the will of the people. You might say people have expressed, but then whether it is actually, but I suppose it would be the case that, once the instrument was passed through the referendum, then one may take a view the consent of the people are satisfied from that perspective.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Demba. Mr. Sambu, if you would like to chip in. I don't know, we 1 hour now, so if you still want
Yes,
to talk about, people's fear
yes,
of...
yes.
Maybe
All
you
I
can
would,
transitional justice. Yeah,
all
yeah,
I
go
would,
ahead.
all I would say briefly is I respectfully disagree with Mr. Demba on that. But like you say, I think there are other subjects that you wish to raise. So I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, so I didn't catch that.
Oh, yeah, I said all I would add is I respectfully disagree with Mr. Demba's view that if at all the draft went to a referendum and it was endorsed, that would mean that it is something that has been endorsed by the people, and it will reflect the will of the people. I disagree with that, because if at all you ask the wrong question, you will get the wrong answer. Whether the majority of the people agree with the question or they disagree with the question, you will get the wrong answer. So based on that, I think I have to respectfully disagree. But just to avoid bogging down on one issue, I understand there are other issues that you want to raise, so I'll let you carry on.
Yeah, yes, like I mentioned, that it might sound a cliche, but you have, if you ask the wrong questions, you get the wrong answers. That is just it's just very basic. I was just like saying, people have this fear. To me, it's not founded, and it's not founded in reality. That because of the draft constitution, or do you want to call it the late draft constitution, is been consigned to the dustbin of history. There is a risk that the transitional justice system, so-called in the Gambia, might go awry. I don't buy it. I don't buy that argument at all. So I don't know, what are your takes on that, gentlemen?
For me, of course, I'm not someone who is. I think transitional justice, the way in which it's administered in Gambia at the moment, obviously we are waiting for the outcome of the public hearing. I always have a big problem with what I call as TRRCs, which is a public hearing, in trying to resolve past human rights violations. Because why I have this, because I believe in punitive justice than anything else, because I've always take a view that punitive justice is a way in which can actually serve as a deterrent to callous citizens who actually committed great crimes against their fellow citizens. But, and TRRC on two front, really, because, the political interference in TRRC make them look very weak from my point of view. I've written about this anyway, just to declare some kind of an interest there. Because as you saw in Kenya, we have the Truth and Justice Conciliation, which was politically interfered it was almost rendered useless to deal with the past human rights violations. The Gambia TRRC, of course, you have to look at the act, whether the act is what the act says. The act is almost a skeleton, in my view, because particularly areas where it says that amnesty should be given, to people, or should not be granted to certain type of crime that are committed by the perpetrators, particularly crimes against humanity. But it is silence on other crimes such as torture, enforced disappearance, you know, past human rights violation. So that leaves a room for anyone to politically interfere and give amnesty to people who would have committed serious crime. And that would be in breach of the already international established standards. So this is my fear of TRRC, because it is prone to politics, and politicians would always use it as a mechanism, to some respect, to advance political interests. Public hearing, to some respect, it does have some role in a transitional justice, because, you know, but the truth that can only bring about reconciliation is the truth that is accurate, is the truth that is unambiguous, is the truth that is not fabricated. A fabricated truth, would not lead, because it's the fact that people are unlikely to really to accept that you are remorseful for your crimes. So that's why, in fact, I always take a view that TRRCs are not really, in my view, they have limited role in the transitional justice. I mean, in particularly Gambia, you look at in terms of the investigations, you could say, you look at, in fact, we don't have the necessary forensics labs or teams. So we all know in criminal proceeding or any proceeding that you do, evidence is crucial to proving your case. So if you don't have that, therefore it renders the whole process, you know, hopeless. But also, I also take another issue is the commissioners. I mean, of course, this is not about disrespecting the commissioners. They are lawfully appointed to do a job. But sometimes, I mean, I think the necessary skills and they need some legal skills, that are important. Particularly if you are going to adjudge or make a decision or some kind of help the decision making process. Some people might argue that a jury system is similar, but a jury is a jury of the fact. You have the jury of the law, which is the judge, and the judge is normally a very well-trained person. So those are some of the things that I have with TRRC. Of course, one of the good things is that I know repatriation is more effective and it can be easily done, because actually it doesn't judicial process those things takes a very long process. Whereas TRRC, where public hearings about the truth of what had happened, if that actually healed people's feeling, that's fine. But the danger of it being politicized is always the problem. And in fact, this is a problem, in African continent generally. I mean, if you go back to the International Military Tribunal after the Second World War, you know, what the Allies did was to establish a criminal court that was competent and that was equipped. What happened in Yugoslavia? There was a criminal court. Even special criminal court of Lebanon, which was actually, it was only a prime minister of Lebanon who was killed by some people, but the Security Council, using its section 7 powers, because it has a judicial power, as to constitute those courts. So those processes, I feel, they are more liable in the sense that, in terms of impartiality, but also the quality of the decision and reasoning. Also, in fact, it does become the case that it's the victims or the accused rights are well protected in those proceedings. So TRRC, yes, it has a role, but it's a limited one. For me, I'm not generally impressed with the TRRC mechanism as a way of dealing with past serious human rights violations.
Okay. Before you jump in, Mr. Sambo, then I suppose it's fair to us to say that it's fair to say you don't fear, you have no fear that the draft constitution being consigned to the dustbin of history has any effect on the TRC's the TRC is going awry. All right.
No, yeah. In fact, I believe that it would not have any because the thing is that to have a flimsy provision in the constitution that may not even render useless if it goes through judicial scrutiny. I think I say this again, and no one should be allowed to contract yourself out of international law. Yes. Particularly, there are laws that are preemption norms. There are settled laws. So if Gambia actually do not really conform to that, that means that they will be breaching their international obligation. But also, the African human rights for people as well, provisions. So these are important. I don't think that the end of the draft constitution means that the transitional justice is almost. But I'm more concerned with the effectiveness of the TRRC, to solve past human rights violations that were committed out of, say, greed or some time, maybe carelessly.
All right, thank you. Mr. Sambu, what's your take on that? Is there any fears at all? Are they genuine fears?
Yes. For me, really, okay, where I would start is the construction of the TRRC process itself, because it all started from the TRRC Act. I think the problem started with the Act. That's where the problem started. Because for me personally, I have a very big problem with the word reconciliation. Because I think it does not really reflect what is needed in the Gambia. Because reconciliation would imply that there were culprits and victims on both sides, which is what happened in Rwanda, of course, because there were culprits and victims on both sides. And in such an instance, it would be mutually beneficial to both sides for there to be reconciliation, because both sides would benefit. But in the case of the Gambia, you have victims on one side and you have culprits on the other side. So why would you make it a law that the victims have to, or why would you mandate the victims by law to reconcile with their culprits? I think that is wholly unacceptable. That is where the problem started, and that's one thing. And the next thing is the TRRC Act has more or less repeated the same problem that we had in the CRC Act. Because the CRC Act, sorry to digress a little bit, the CRC Act did not mandate the president to send the draft constitution to the National Assembly once it has been submitted to him. It leaves that open to discretion. So the president could have sat on the draft. There was nothing anybody could have done legally, because the act did not mandate that he should do that. It was a discretion. Now we come to the TRRC Act. That is the same thing that we have there. Once the TRRC is finished and they make their recommendation to the president, there is nothing within the TRRC Act at all which compels the president legally to implement the recommendations. So it is just a discretion. And I think we have seen what happened with the Janneh Commission. So I think it has to be something that we should foresee, or we should have a reasonable foresight of what is going to happen with the TRRC report, because the president would well, it would be assumed that the president would have more of an interest in the recommendations of the TRRC than he would have had in the case of the Janneh Commission recommendation, because clearly, as we know, we have elections at the end of next year. It's back to the politics again, Mr. Demba. Like you lamented at the start, we cannot avoid it.
No.
So we have elections next year, and we all know that the president is struggling to build up a political base, and the only likely allies that the president could rely on to maximize his political capital to ensure that he is re-elected is APRC. And I think there's going to be a problem if we have a law which does not say you must, Mr. President, you must implement this by this date. We don't have that. So the president gets the report. Guess what's going to happen? I'm sorry to be a cynic, but I think what the president will do is the TRRC report will just give the president a very useful tool to bring APRC to his side. It will be, look, my friends, I have this with me. So you either play ball or I just implement it to the letter. So I think that is what's going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
That is the sad reality. But it is a problem that should have been foreseen and it should have been addressed in the act, which brings me back to the problem that we have when it comes to the issue of transitional justice. No disrespect to the former Attorney General, but I think in hindsight, I think even if he sits back and reflects, I am sure he'll agree that there are lots of things that he has done which could have been done differently, because I think it was a very big mistake to have this to use the mechanism, which I agree with everything that Mr. Demba has said. It is a very problematic mechanism to use given the circumstances. And even if you are going to use it, you have to make sure that it is victim-led. But what we have in the case of the TRRC is not victim-led. The victims are pretty much victims of the system that is supposed to give them justice, in the same way that they were victims of Yahya Jammeh. It is just the reality. It's a sad reality. But unfortunately, we are where we are, and I hope moving forward, I am not sure what the internal National Assembly rules are when it comes to amending existing legislation. But I think the National Assembly and even the Victim Center, if any of them is watching this, I think what they should really be doing is they should be taking a very, very close look at the TRRC Act, and they should make sure that they speak to the National Assembly and ensure that before the TRRC publishes their report, that act is amended so that it binds the president and it compels the president legally to implement the report by a certain date, because otherwise it will just be an additional arsenal in the political tools that are available to the president to use to win re-election. Because guaranteed, if the president has the report on his table and it comes to crunch that either APRC join him or he will implement the report, I think we can all guess what is going to happen. APRC, the president would get what he wants, and that report would just collect dust somewhere.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's nice to see you guys get the final point on the legal point there, which obviously is going to elude me. But I mean, for me, I just always ask this question as a rhetorical question. Okay, if the TRRC makes its what do you want to call it findings, like you said, it's political capital to be gained out of this. Let's make no mistake about that. Yeah, it's always political calculations. I mean, politics is all about winning anyway, fundamentally, like Dr. Sonia said here the other day when we first had this episode. So if it's not in his interest, he's going to sit on it. That's just the basic fact. It's just human nature. But then my question to you guys, obviously, you guys been legal practitioners. What happens if, for example, a victim wanted to actually institute, let's say, a action lawsuit against, let's say, the Ministry of Defense, with the argument that is the army, the members of the military, or the members of the armed forces, or junglers, whatever you want to call them, they are part of the military force, who, for example, will kill somebody's brother, let's say. So what happens if they want to go to court? So where do we stand here? Does the TRC basically said, our findings is this, that we're going to forgive them, we're going to move on. So where do we go from here? Because, for example, if somebody like myself, like if a member of my family has been murdered by like, let's say, what's it called, junglers or any member of the security services, and I will has my fundamental rights is given me, I want to take them to court over that. So where do we stand with the TRC's findings?
Well, in fact, you mentioned very important point, which is really there are fundamental life to liberty, life. One life should not be deprived unlawfully, and also one should be free of torture. And the one that guarantee that is the state of the Gambia that guarantee that, which means that you'll have to take an action against the Gambia. The question would be, where would you go to? Then that's why you have to go beyond Gambia and take Gambia to at least the human rights courts in the Gambia to say that the state of Gambia has failed woefully to protect your fundamental rights. As a result, that have led to some being tortured or being brutalized in any other form. Yes, and that's my understanding. So you have to take it to the human rights court, at the international level, because as you know, Gambia is part of already of certain acceded to certain instruments. So that means that those could be enforced through that. There may be some exceptional, some cases, local remedy. I don't know. I mean, ECOWAS, because as my understanding is that you don't have to exhaust the local remedy. You can go straight to them or straight to other instruments. Yes.
Okay. Thank you
Yes,
for that.
right.
Go on, Mr. Sam. Go ahead.
Yes. I was just going to reaffirm what Mr. Demba said there. Yes, that would be the case. But the problem we have in the case of the Gambia is obviously taking legal action is very expensive, and most of the victims are unfortunately not able to afford legal services to be able to pursue civil action, just like Solomon Demba described. So unfortunately, I think that is the obstacle for most of the victims. But I hope I am not sure how equipped the victim center is when it comes to the issue of supporting victims to take civil action against the state. But I think that is something that they should be considering, because I do not think that they will get justice through this TRRC. They won't. Even if the TRRC gets everything right and they make a very they make a very solid recommendation or set of recommendations to the government, I just don't think this government would implement them for the reasons which I have highlighted. And I am sure even if at all those reasons do not exist, the state would always find an excuse. They can easily hide behind the existing clauses of the 1997 Constitution to say that, oh, we cannot implement this because of the Constitution, which I think your initial question had in mind. But like Mr. Demba, I tend to be of the view that I do not see anything within the existing 1997 Constitution which constrains the issue of transitional justice. Yes, there are obstacles. I'm not saying there are no obstacles. Yes, there are obstacles, but these obstacles can be removed. One of them is obviously Section 69, which gives Jame immunity. Obviously, it immunes Jame from civil action and criminal prosecution for anything that happened during the time that he was president.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, this immunity can be revoked.
Mm-hmm.
And subsection 3 of section 69 clearly states that to revoke it, the state can lay a motion before the National Assembly, and once 2/3 of the National Assembly support the motion, then the immunity goes. So that is one obstacle that can be removed. And the next obstacle would be the immunity clauses, which are in the schedules within section 232.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For these ones, because if you look at the schedules, one of the schedules, I believe, is paragraph 17 in one of the schedules. It says that the National Assembly does not have any power or any authority to alter or repeal these schedules, which I think it's. I don't think just because the this provision says that the National Assembly don't have the power to alter or repeal these schedules, just because it says it, it has to be the case. I don't think it is the case at all, because if we look at the 1997 Constitution, there is only one provision which restrains legislative authority, which is section 100. That is the same section I believe Mr. Demba has referenced it earlier, when it comes to the issue of making retroactive legislation. So section 100 clearly states the issues which the National Assembly cannot exercise judicial authority over. So based on that, unless and until there is anything within these schedules that falls within those restrictions, the National Assembly can repeal it. Because as we know, and I think Mr. Demba would agree with me, that when it comes to the issue of constitutional law, no sitting parliament can bind a future parliament. So whichever parliament it was that endorsed or that adopted the 1997 Constitution in January 97, when constitutional democracy was restored in the Gambia, they cannot bind the existing parliament. So I think because these schedules, there is nothing within these schedules which fall within the category of things that the National Assembly is not allowed to exercise legislative authority over, as far as Section 100 is concerned. So that being the case, it is a restriction, yes, but I don't think it is valid. Yeah. So in which case, I think the National Assembly should repeal the provision and get rid of it altogether. So once that goes, the immunity of Jammeh is revoked under Section 69. I don't think there would be any more obstacles in that 1997 Constitution as far as transitional justice is concerned. So to answer your questions, Dave, no, I do not think that the draft Constitution failing hampers transitional justice at all.
Okay. Thank you so much. I mean, we coming to a close. I mean, we've been 1 hour 30 minutes. It's Friday for me. I don't go anywhere. If you guys happy to go for another 30 minutes, I'm happy. But I don't know if you could order.
Yeah.
I don't go. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say something. You know, I think we probably at the end of the nearing of this thing. But what I wanted to say is what Mr. my learned friend said, which is quite an important aspect of the thing. You know, certain crime, as you know, they warrant international jurisdiction. You know, I mean, if we even take it from that perspective as well, we could say that, you know, they cannot be immune. I mean, immunity rationale could be displaced if the need be to ensure that, you know, those people who commit serious crimes are brought to the book. You know, you saw the case of Pinochet. It's an interesting one, which, you know, you just mentioned about Chile today. So that was the case, you know. So the thing is that, you know, we could say, well, you know, there are provisions, but of course they can be displayed. And the principle that you rely on, which is cogent, Mr. Sambu, is the fact that, you know, no parliament should be allowed to burn another parliament by a future parliament. So the parliament is the supreme legislative body, and that also falls onto the idea that the power resides in the people. So you see how that argument is coming around. It's the people, whatever you've written, at the end of the day, if you go back to the people, that's what should prevail. Because actually parliamentarians are elected by the people, and that's why that principle that's the philosophical principle behind it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the immunity clause, in my view, would stand judicially scrutiny. I think they are likely to crumble.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we're gonna close very soon, but I just wanted to just basically buttress what you said. I mean, you did mention that the power resides in the people, but I think it's important to have a little caveat here: informed citizenry. Our people are informed.
Yeah. Indeed,
This is fundamentally lacking. Yeah. But anyway, we're probably gonna wrap up very soon. So I'll give the floor to you to just give them closing statements. First to Mr. Demba, then after Mr. Sambu, and then obviously we'll say we'd like to extend our gratitude to people who are viewing. Normally it's quite interactive, but I'm using my daughter's laptop today, so I'm like I'm not like an administrator, if you want to call it that. So I've got the same features as you guys, so I can see the comments, but I cannot share them, unfortunately, because my laptop is playing up, so I had to borrow my daughter's one today. So there you go. But anyway, so I think one of the producers is just about to do some of those for us. But if you would like to just make some closing statements, Mr. Demba, please, and then also after that, Mr. Sambu. And then obviously we'll say thank you to people who watch us here every day. And Mr. Jami, obviously, the guy who built this platform, and he would always like us to emphasize this, that this platform is built for Gambians to have communication, for us to discourse. It's like what we call in sociology, this is like a public space. Yeah, but this is socially mediated or digitally mediated public space. So, I mean, you go back to Habermas. Habermas is also obviously a German sociologist, philosopher. So he believes in this public space. That's where people make decisions. But again, coming back to this informed decision, informed citizenry. So it's very important that we inform our people. So the floor is all yours, Mr. Demba, please.
Thank you. I'm grateful once again, the people of great city of Gunjur. I appreciate today to have me here. I'm humbled to share the platform with my landed friend, Mr. Sambo, and my only nephew, Mr. Mani. Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation. I really enjoyed this. I hope I offer my view correctly, and yes. But, my point is that the point of law is to render fairness, and fairness is a fundamental tenet of law. Yeah. Justice. Without fairness, there can be no justice. Yeah. So fairness do require everyone to take, other people's rights into consideration, and that includes every citizen in the Gambia. I'm grateful to be here, and we hope to see you again. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Sambu, please.
Okay. Yes. I would just like to re-echo the sentiments that have been expressed by Solomon Demba, and thank you, Dave, for having us or for having me on this platform. I think these are the sort of conversations that we need, and unfortunately, like you have lamented, I think we lack an informed citizenry in the Gambia, or we have the problem of citizens being informed as to when it comes to the issues of civic importance. So, but platforms like this are very good, and definitely, I am always open whenever the need arises. If I'm invited, I'm always I'll always avail myself, because at the end of the day, I think it is only through discussions like this that we can exchange ideas, and we can try and inform each other, as well as the viewers who are watching. And like you pointed out, at the start, and I think Mr. Demba did as well. We are not here to say that we are the experts. We know everything. No, we are not. We're just ordinary citizens, and all it is that we are doing, we are just sharing the little that we know with everybody else. So definitely, I think it was a very, very helpful and fruitful conversation. So thank you very much, Dave, and thank you very much, Solomon. Even though we disagree, we have discussed the issues in a very broadly manner, and I understand where Solomon was coming from on some of the issues that we disagree on. And I am led to believe that he feels the same about some of the things that he disagrees with me as well. So I think this is the spirit that we should build. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. Obviously, it's nice, like you said, just to reiterate what you said. It's all about having these discussions. I think we need to have more of this. It's important, like you said as well. Again, Mr. Sambu, none of us are claiming to be experts here. We're just exchanging ideas. We're hoping within this process, a lot more of us can learn, and how we can get more informed, because informed citizenry is empowered citizenry. But just to reiterate again, before I think I started on this theme, and I think I'll try to close on this theme again. Having debates and discussions is not a zero-sum game. It's not about somebody being a winner, somebody being a loser at the end of the day. The premise for us, for me personally anyway, any discussions I go into, is for me to learn something from it, to better myself from that, to get better informed from that discussion. I think that's what is very valuable. So I think that's the tradition we try to encourage here. So this platform, I'll repeat again, is for everybody, from every sphere of the Gambian society. If you got something you would like to discuss with other fellow Gambians, give us a call. We are ready. We got guys in the background, they do the technical production, and people like us. I mean, we are here to help and host. I mean, we're not the most eloquent people in the world, but the Gambia has come to the stage whereby we all need to be ready to raise our head above the parapet and put the shyness to one side and say, look, for 60 years, we've not made any progress. What has been lacking in that equation is it's like activism. It's been informed decision-making. It's actually the people being informed, civically empowerment. So if we can do our little bit to help that, I think that should be welcome. Once again, gentlemen, I say thank you all. And we need to do this some more. You don't have to wait for me, Mr. Sambu, Mr. Demba, and our viewers. If you got something you would like to discuss, send us an email. Text us to say, oh, guys, can I use your platform? I've got something to discuss. And then we'll be very, very happy to be here to serve you, because we are serving our people, importantly. Good night, everybody. Thank you, guys. Once again, we're very honored. Thank you.
Thanks.